Why do you start with fire and end in ashes? It's a question that lives quietly in the back of your mind, especially in the late hours of the night when the world grows still and the noise inside you becomes louder. You know the feeling, the spark of a new beginning, the surge of energy, the promise that this time will be different. You see the version of yourself you could become, the one who rises early, works consistently, moves with purpose. You feel it, that future you is real, possible, close, and yet somewhere, somehow, the fire dwindles, the excitement fades, the days slip, and you find yourself back in the same familiar place, wondering why it happened again. There is a quiet war inside you. One part of you reaches forward, desperate to grow, evolve, and become. The other pulls backward, afraid of change, afraid of failure, and perhaps even more afraid of success. You live between these two selves, the one who wants to expand and the one who wants to disappear. And every day, without realizing it, you choose which one leads. The world calls it laziness, lack of discipline, a failure of willpower. But if you look closely, if you really listen, you'll notice something else. Behind every abandoned goal is a bruise, a memory, a belief that you didn't choose, but learned. Something in you whispers, why try when you'll only disappoint yourself again? And the moment you hear that voice, even faintly, your mind begins its retreat. This is not a failure of strength. This is psychology. The brain is a survival machine, not a greatness machine. It is wired to avoid pain, not to create meaning. And sometimes the thing you're trying to build reminds your mind of old wounds, the times you weren't enough, weren't supported, weren't seen. Your resistance is not random. It is emotional memory disguised as procrastination. So you punish yourself, you call yourself weak, you carry guilt like a second skin. But guilt has never built a life. Shame has never sparked a flame. Criticizing yourself for struggling is like yelling at a garden for forgetting to bloom. The truth is gentle, yet almost unbearable to realize. You were never taught how to motivate yourself. You were taught how to obey, how to fear mistakes, how to chase approval, but not how to move for yourself. So the war continues until you learn to see your motivation not as a test of character, but as the architecture of your inner world. And to understand this architecture, we have to go back to where motivation was born and where it was first broken. Before you ever knew what a goal was, your body already understood movement. You reached for things. You crawled. You walked. Not because someone told you to, but because something inside you was curious, alive, unfolding. Motivation was natural, then effortless, instinctive, like a flame that burned simply because it existed. But something changed, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, through the reactions of the people you depended on most. Imagine a child who learns early that applause is the currency of love. When they draw a picture, their parents smile. When they get an A, they are hugged. When they perform, excel, impress, affection arrives like sunlight. But on ordinary days, when they are simply being, the warmth fades. The child learns a dangerous equation: achievement equals worth. So they begin to chase gold stars like oxygen, terrified of what silence might mean. They don't learn to move because something feels meaningful, they learn to move to be seen. Love becomes conditional, and the fire inside them flickers only when someone is watching. Now imagine another child, one who is met not with applause, but indifference. They reach out with effort, excitement, hope, and no one notices. Their attempts to shine are met with distraction, criticism, or coldness. The message settles deep in their nervous system. Effort changes. Nothing. I don't matter. So, slowly, they stop reaching. They stop trying. Not because they lack potential, but because hope itself became painful. Their fire doesn't die. It simply learns to hide, to burn quietly where no one can see it. Both children grow up, and both carry invisible instructions written long before they understood language. You learn to measure yourself the way others measured you. You begin to look outward for permission to begin, for validation that you are enough, for applause to justify your existence. Your motivation becomes an approval engine, fueled by the eyes around you. If no one is watching, if no one is expecting, if no one will applaud, your fire dims. Not because you are lazy, but because your brain learned that burning without being seen is pointless or dangerous. This is how you lose the original flame, the flame that once burned simply because it was alive. You were never taught to move for yourself. You were trained to perform. Your fire was sculpted into something fragile, reactive, dependent, a flame waiting for permission to live. Your fire was never taught to burn for you, only for someone else. And so we grow older, carrying a spark we don't know how to claim. But adulthood reveals the cost of such early lessons, and the mask begins to form. When you grow older, the world stops asking who you are. It starts asking what you can produce. And so, without noticing, you begin to build a mask. A carefully crafted persona that looks confident, determined, disciplined. You become the one who is always working on something, always pushing, always striving. People admire this version of you. They call you hardworking, focused, ambitious. And you nod, because it's easier to let them believe it than to explain the truth buried underneath. The truth is that the persona of being driven is often less about purpose and more about protection. You've learned that stillness makes you vulnerable. That slowing down lets old doubts catch up. So you keep moving, faster and faster, as if running from a shadow that knows your name. You pack your schedule, fill your calendar, turn every quiet moment into a task. Productivity becomes your armor, a shield against the fear that if you stop, you might have to face the parts of yourself you've carefully avoided. For some, this mask takes the form of overworking, burning through sleep, health, relationships, believing that exhaustion equals worth. For others, the mask looks different. It's procrastination, delay, avoidance. Not because you don't care, but because trying has become terrifying. The risk of failing feels like a direct threat to your identity. Your nervous system remembers the lessons of childhood. Effort must earn love, and failure erases it. So your mind protects you the only way it knows how, by stopping you before you start. Neuroscience calls this self-preservation. Psychology calls it avoidance coping. But to you, it simply feels like you're constantly letting yourself down. The world sees your actions, but only you feel the invisible weight behind them. You chase goals not because they call to your soul, but because you hope they will silence the voice that says you are not enough. Every achievement becomes a temporary oxygen mask relief that fades the moment you exhale. And so you seek the next milestone, the next accomplishment, the next reason to exist. The mask smiles, the world applauds, but inside, the flame flickers, tired, starving for something real. And here lies the quiet tragedy. You have been running so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to move towards something you actually want, not something you feel obligated to prove. But a mask, no matter how polished, is still only a mask. To understand why you run and what you're running from, you must finally turn inward. But to understand the engine, we need to understand how it's built. Have you ever Notice that the moment you want to change, your mind immediately invents reasons not to. The resistance appears before the action even begins. And you may think this means something is wrong with you, that you lack discipline or strength. But your struggle has less to do with your character and more to do with how the human brain is wired to move. Motivation does not begin after accomplishment, it begins before. It is anticipation, the brain's way of predicting a rewarding future. Neuroscientists call this the dopamine motivation loop. Dopamine does not surge when you achieve the goal, it surges when you pursue it. The excitement, the spark, the vision of the person you could become, that is your brain showing you a reward worth moving toward. But when the goal is tied to fear, pressure, or past emotional wounds, that dopamine signal becomes tangled. Instead of excitement, you feel dread. Instead of movement, you freeze. This is where the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation matters. Intrinsic motivation is born from curiosity, meaning, and personal growth, the desire to expand because something inside you stirs. Extrinsic motivation is fueled by comparison, validation, and performance, moving because others are watching. The first feels like breathing, the second feels like suffocating. But most people grow up on the second, and the brain remembers. Psychology calls this self-determination theory, the idea that humans need three things to stay naturally motivated: autonomy to feel we are choosing our path, competence to feel we can improve with effort, relatedness to feel connected and supported as we grow. When these needs are met, motivation flows like water. When they are threatened, the flame inside begins to flicker. A child who was controlled, shamed, or dismissed learns that autonomy is dangerous. A child who was mocked for trying learns that competence is a lie. A child who felt emotionally alone learns that relatedness is a risk. And so, without ever realizing it, you grow into an adult who wants to change, but whose nervous system believes change is unsafe. Your brain is not fighting your goals. It is trying to protect you from old pain. This is why you can want something deeply and still avoid it desperately. You are not lazy. You are a human being whose motivational circuitry was shaped by experiences you did not choose. But there is a cost to a life where the flame cannot burn freely. And that cost is not just frustration, it is the slow creation of a shadow that lives behind your ambition. And that shadow has teeth. There comes a moment when the pursuit of becoming better turns against you. A moment when the desire to grow becomes a blade you point inward. And it happens quietly, not in a dramatic collapse, but in the slow erosion of your belief that you are capable of change at all. You know this feeling. You wake up with the memory of last night's promises. I'll start tomorrow. I'll be different. I'll fix this. But morning arrives, heavy, and the flame inside you refuses to spark. You stare at the tasks, the goals, the life you want to build, and something inside you freezes. And instead of compassion, the first voice you hear is violence. What is wrong with you? Why can't you just do it? Everyone else can. You're just lazy, weak, broken. This is the dark side of self-motivation, when the pursuit of better becomes a punishment for not already being enough. You live with a fire that will not ignite. It sits inside your chest like wet wood, full of potential but unable to burn. And the more you try to force it, command it, shame it into lighting, the more it resists. The mind does not respond to cruelty. The nervous system does not open under attack. Yet you keep swinging the whip, believing pressure is the cure. And the world around you, especially now, makes this pain sharper. You scroll through screens filled with people, achieving, transforming, announcing progress. Their lives look effortless. Their discipline looks natural. Their growth looks clean. And in comparison, your struggle feels humiliating. You don't just fail, you feel alone in your failure. Social comparison is no longer occasional. It is ambient, inescapable, a constant whisper reminding you of everything you should already be. So you begin to wear your guilt like skin. You apologize without speaking. You lower your voice in your own mind. You begin to move through your days like someone observing life from behind glass. Present, but not truly alive. Wanting, but afraid of wanting. Dreaming, but exhausted by the dreams themselves. The tragedy is not that you lack motivation. The tragedy is that you learn to motivate yourself through self-punishment, not self-connection. You learn to push yourself with fear instead of warmth, pressure instead of meaning, shame instead of understanding. Your problem is not that you don't want to grow. Your problem is that the path you were taught to grow through feels like self-destruction, and there is only so long a human being can survive fighting themselves. Which raises a deeper question. What if the world taught you to chase achievement, but never taught you how to belong to yourself first? To answer that, we have to look at the world around you and the systems that shaped your belief in what makes a life valuable. Look closely at the world around you, and you'll notice something unsettling. We celebrate outcomes, not humanity. We applaud achievements, not the effort it took to survive. Somewhere along the way, society stopped valuing being and began worshipping producing, and you, like everyone else, were taught to internalize this. From childhood, you were shown that applause comes after performance. Good grades brought smiles. Winning brought praise. Productivity brought belonging. So you learn to measure yourself the same way society does, by output, milestones, proofs. Your identity became something you earn, not something you inherently possess. This is not accidental, it is cultural engineering. We live in a world shaped by capitalism, where human value is tied to productivity. You aren't encouraged to ask, what makes my life meaningful? Instead, the question becomes, what can I produce that has value to others? Even rest, passion, and enjoyment must be justified with results. If you read, it should make you smarter. If you exercise, it should make you attractive. If you rest, it must be called recovery for future labor. Work harder, do more, be more, earn your place. This phrase has become more than instruction, it has become a spiritual doctrine, a silent religion. The altar is progress, the God is success, and the sacrifice is you. So when you slow down, when you take a breath, when you simply exist, guilt appears. The shadow of unworthiness rises. You feel like you're wasting time, falling behind, disappointing an unseen audience. You feel the phantom weight of expectations pressing on your chest, because in a world that rewards performance, rest feels like disappearing. And here is the quiet tragedy. If your value depends on your output, do you exist when you rest? This question is not superficial, it is existential. It cuts into your identity. Your nervous system has learned that survival depends on being useful, being admirable, being productive. So when you fail, pause, or simply stop, you don't just fear stagnation, you fear invisibility, irrelevance, abandonment. Psychologists call this conditional self-worth, the belief that you matter only when you are impressive. It is one of the most common and invisible wounds of modern life, and it leaves you with a heart that is always racing but never arriving, a mind that is always striving but never at peace, a soul that is always burning but never warm. You weren't taught to live, you were trained to perform. And the cost of that training does not simply show up in exhaustion, it shows up in what happens to your emotional world when the performance becomes impossible. There is a certain heaviness that settles into your body when you have spent years struggling to move yourself through life. It's not exhaustion from effort, but exhaustion from fighting yourself. A quiet fatigue that does not show on your face, but lives behind your eyes. You felt it. That slow ache of waking up and realizing you are once again negotiating with your own mind just to get through the day. It begins as anxiety, the constant awareness that you are falling short of the person you want to be. You look around and see others moving, building, advancing. Their momentum feels effortless. Yours feels like dragging your feet through mud. You tell yourself to push harder, to try again, to finally get it right. But the harder you push, the heavier the weight becomes. And somewhere along the way, anxiety quietly transforms into self-hate. You start believing the worst things about yourself. Maybe I'm just not capable. Maybe I'm just weak. Maybe something in me is broken. These thoughts don't shout. They murmur, steadily, like water shaping stone. They become familiar, almost comforting, because they explain your pain, even if the explanation is cruel. Your ambition doesn't disappear. It simply becomes paralyzed. You can see your potential with perfect clarity, but your body will not move toward it. This is a unique kind of suffering, to feel your future calling you while your past holds your ankles. You exist in a constant state of almost beginning, almost changing, almost becoming, and the longer you stay here, the more your identity begins to fracture. Who am I if I'm always stuck? Who am I if I never become the person I imagine? Who am I if my fire never truly burns? Identity collapses not all at once, but slowly. You begin to feel like a ghost in your own life, visible, functional, but hollow. You laugh in conversations, you show up where you're needed, you play the role, but inside there is a numbness, a quiet grief for the life you haven't lived yet. And the most painful part is how silent this suffering is. You carry it alone, believing no one else feels this way, believing you are the exception, when in truth, you are the rule. Because the world taught you to motivate yourself through pressure, punishment, and comparison, not through understanding, warmth, or meaning. But hear this, gently. There is a way to change that does not require violence against yourself. A way to build a life that feels like yours, not a performance, not a chase, not a mask. And to find it, you must learn to rebuild your fire from the inside. What if the part of you you've been fighting was never your enemy? What if the battle you've been losing was unwinnable from the start, not because you are weak, but because you were using violence to solve a wound that needed gentleness? Healing begins the moment you realize that you cannot bully yourself into becoming who you want to be. Self-compassion is not softness. It is strategy. When you speak to yourself with cruelty, your nervous system goes into defense the same way a child would when shouted at. The brain shuts down curiosity, creativity, and effort. But when you speak to yourself with understanding, a new possibility opens. You stop fighting your mind and start working with it. Think of your motivation like a small flame. You do not force a flame to grow by striking it. You shield it, feed it, breathe with it. You protect it while it learns to rise. This is where small, meaningful goals matter, not to prove anything, but to retrain your dopamine. Every time you take a step, not for applause or achievement, but for your own alignment, your brain learns something new. That movement can feel safe. That effort can feel alive. That growth can feel like oxygen again. Not big leaps, not dramatic transformation, but gentle consistency. The brain does not trust intensity, it trusts repetition. A 5-minute step every day is more transformative than a 5-hour burst once a month. Because change is not built in the moments you are inspired. It is built in the moments you show up, even when the inspiration is quiet. This is the shift from outcome-based identity to process-based identity. You stop asking, "Did I succeed?" and you start asking, "Did I show up?" You begin to celebrate effort, not as consolation, but as creation. When effort itself becomes meaningful, the pressure dissolves. The fear softens. The resistance loosens. And something beautiful happens. Motivation stops feeling like a cage and starts feeling like a conversation, a collaboration between who you are now and who you are becoming. You don't grow by force. You grow by guidance, by curiosity, by returning to the feeling of being that child who once moved simply because life pulled them forward. You don't need to ignite a wildfire. You just need to keep the flame alive. Your journey does not require perfection. It requires partnership with yourself. You do not need to force yourself when you learn to work with yourself. This is how the fire returns, slowly, steadily, faithfully, from the inside out. There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when you realize the war you've been fighting was never between you and the world. It was between you and the parts of yourself that were still afraid. The child who learned to move only when watched. The adult who built a mask to survive. The mind that mistook pressure for purpose. The heart that tried to bloom in harsh weather. All of these versions of you were never failures. They were survivors. They were doing the best they could with what they had. But there is something sacred waiting beneath all of that survival. A flame you didn't notice, because you were too busy trying to earn what was already inside you. You were not born empty. You were not born unmotivated, unfinished, or unworthy. You were born with a spark, the same spark that made you reach before you were taught how, that made you wonder before you were taught to fear, that made you feel drawn to certain dreams before anyone told you which ones were acceptable. That flame didn't disappear. It simply dimmed in response to the world around you. You do not need to find your fire. You do not need to chase it, build it, or steal it from someone more capable than you. The flame was always yours. You lost access to it when you believed that your worth needed to be proven. When you believed your life was a performance instead of a presence. When you believed love was something to earn instead of something to return to. But now, you are old enough to question the script you inherited. What if growth is not something you force, but something you allow? What if becoming yourself is not a climb, but a return? You are not meant to chase the fire. You are meant to remember that you are the one who lights it. Meaning does not come from grand victories, or applause, or transformation visible to others. Meaning comes from the smallest act of choosing yourself when no one is watching. From the quiet decision to stay, to try, to breathe, to believe your life is still unfolding. There is no finish line. There is no final version of you to achieve. There is only the ongoing, intimate process of walking back toward your own flame. So the real question is not, how do I become someone else? The real question is, who could you become if you stopped running from yourself and walked with yourself instead?